Welcome to the Indiana Football Weekly Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I am your host for Indiana Football Weekly, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my co-host, Cole Hanna. How you doing, Cole?
I'm doing pretty good, Mike. Can't complain. We got Indiana end the year finally back in the bowl field. We'll see where they get slotted to go, but it's good. We've been out of the bowl field for a couple of years now, so to get back in, it feels, pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And despite falling behind by as much as 18 points in the second half, the Boilermakers from Purdue rallied to force overtime on their home field. The Hoosiers ended up pulling out a thriller in the second extra session when quarterback Peyton Ramsey ran it from 1 yard out after Purdue had been kicked or forced to kick a field goal. What was your take on this game? Because Indiana dominated the way we thought for most of it, but kind of let up off the gas at the end.
Yeah, defensively, there were some worrying signs I saw here. You really let a Purdue football team that, coming into the game, I think everyone kind of expected Purdue was going to be able to throw the ball. The Indiana secondary has been exposed, I think, in multiple games, and Purdue is a team that's going to want to throw the ball early and often. So, the fact that Purdue really threw for over 400 yards, it was disappointing but not entirely shocking. I think how well Xander Horvath for Purdue was able to run on Indiana's defense was very, very surprising. It's not exactly a shutdown Indiana defense, but they had at least been decent against the run when they were playing some of those middle-of-the-pack Big Ten teams, and you were playing what many people thought was the worst running football team in the Big Ten, and Horvath just carved them up all game long. He goes 164 yards, 2 touchdowns, over 7 yards per carry. That was really, really worrying because you're going to be playing, you think, whoever you get in a bowl game against a team that has a much, much better running game than what Purdue's going to have. And if you allowed a Purdue offense that really had been one-dimensional all year long to really had an extra dimension added there with their running attack, and they had to make the Indiana defense play honest, and that made their passing game just all the more deadly. So they've got to get that figured out. It was an awful defensive performance. There's no way around that. They got the win, but they gave up nearly 600 total yards of offense. They've got to be better than that. And offensively, I thought they played, pretty damn well. Peyton Ramsey had a really good game. The only worrying thing is I thought when Samson James left that game in the second half with an injury, the Indiana running game really just grinded to a halt. Ronnie Walker couldn't do a whole lot on the ground. Obviously, Stevie Scott was already out as well, and they really couldn't get much going in the running game. Hopefully they can get Samson James back for that bowl game and Stevie Scott as well, because without those two guys in there, the running game really stopped. And, it was good to see Whop Phillier back as well. He had a huge game, and clearly they've missed him the last couple of weeks because he's a lethal weapon in the passing game. I think probably easily Indiana's best player on the team right now. And, at the end of the day, they've got a lot of holes to fill defensively, and that's going to be, I think, the huge concern with this team going forward. But they got the Old Oaken bucket back. It's been a couple of years since they won that, and they got to the 8th win that they haven't been able to get 8 wins in a long, long time. So to get that 8 win, even if it wasn't the most convincing performance, it's still good to see them end the season on a relatively high note.
All right, and the one thing that disturbed me was Logan Justice, who's been perfect on the season, 14 for 14, comes in, misses 3 straight field goal attempts. Justice is a Lou Groza Award nominee. Hopefully, all those votes were cast before this game.
Yeah, he had been perfect on the year from field goals coming into this game, and yeah, I don't know what happened. Clearly, the weather, I think, was affecting some things, but both kickers had to go kick in it. And, Purdue's kicker is able to go 2 of 3 in that span. So, he just has to be better. But hats off to Charles Campbell. He got essentially thrown in there in the middle of the game, had really not kicked, and had to come in. I believe it was a 36-yard field goal. Kicks it, hits it right through the uprights, and Indiana somehow got a delay of game penalty on that play. Moved it back to 41. He had to kick it again and buried it again back-to-back. I thought that was really, really clutch play from Charles Campbell to kind of be thrown in there probably when he wasn't expecting it due to Logan Justice's struggles. And, I don't really know what to think of them. The weather was clearly not good, and that was affecting things. And then there was a decent win, but I didn't think the weather was that bad that you shouldn't be able to make kicks. And a lot of those kicks were not exactly from unmakeable distances. You're talking about 35 to 40-yard kicks, and I believe one was even inside of 30 that he missed. So, it was really, really worrying that he kind of just couldn't get it going. I would like to think this is just kind of a one-game trend, a blip on the radar, not a sign of a growing trend that's going to be coming up with him, because he's been perfect all year long. It would be tough to have a better year than what Logan Justice has had coming into this game, but certainly not a good game from him at all. And at times it came very, very close to costing them this win.
Well, the good thing is, though, Indiana wins 8 games for the 7th or 8th time. Is it 7th? 7th time in school history. That's messed up. When did you start playing football? 1970?
Yeah, I mean, it's been, I guess, it's been at
eight
least
wins 7 times, Cole. How is that possible?
Yeah, it's unfortunately, one of the worst football teams, of all time. You look across college football, and they've really struggled to just put together winning football teams. I think there's been, at that point, that's, I think, partly an administration issue. I'm not really sure there's ever been the commitment to the football team to really get there.
There still isn't either, since we've got about the lowest paid coaching staff.
Yeah, he's got I believe Tom Allen was the lowest paid coach in all Power 5 football for a little bit. I think California or someone might now have a coach just slightly below Tom Allen. So he's now the second lowest paid coach in all Power 5 football. The investment's not there. Now, they've made some investment in some facilities recently that, they updated the locker room. They've added those expansions to both end zones. And, the investment is rising. And Fred Glass has said he's going to come out with a new contract for Tom Allen this offseason. They're going to extend him and raise his pay significantly. So we'll see what the structure of that deal is. But, yeah, there just has not been much investment in the football team, and it shows. I mean, the football team has been awful. I mean, this is probably I think it's only the maybe 10th or 11th time they've been to a bowl game. I mean, they haven't been to bowl games that often, let alone 8-win seasons. It's been a really pathetic football program for a long, long time. And hopefully Tom Allen has it on the rise. And this is certainly the best season they've had maybe in, 20, 25 years. And, hopefully that's a sign of things to come. But yeah, the history of this football program is pathetic. It's tough to find programs with a worse history than Indiana.
Yeah, they've only had 2 times where they've won 9 games. And I think that was 1945 and 1967 or 68.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think they had plenty of opportunities to get to 9 wins this season as well, and they just couldn't capitalize on them. Especially that Michigan State. Yeah, you look at that game now, to see where Michigan State's fallen. I mean, they were struggling with Maryland really in that game at the end of the year at home. So that was kind of shocking how far they've fallen as a football team. But yeah, I mean, I think this is really a team that you look at that Michigan State game and say, yeah, we should have won that game. Or even Penn State. I mean, I think Indiana had more than their fair share of opportunities to win that Penn State game, but they just, couldn't get over the hump. And it's disappointing to see, but, with Indiana football, it's tough to complain about 8-4 seasons because we just, like you said, it's only happened 8 or 9 times. I mean, we just don't, or 7 times. We just don't see that happen here much at Indiana. So, there's still definitely a lot of room for improvement with this team. They were far from perfect this year, and they still got plenty of holes to fix. But to win 8 games in Indiana, that's special, and that's a good sign of things to come, I believe.
Yeah, Indiana's 3-8 all time in bowl games.
So they've been to 11 bowl games. Yeah,
the last time Indiana won a bowl game was 1991. They won the Copper Bowl by beating Baylor 24-0. I actually remember watching this game. I've got it on a VHS tape.
Yeah, and looking it up, their first season was in 1887. So they've been to 11 bowl games.
How about this? The first season was 1887. The first bowl game was the only Rose Bowl they ever played in 1968, where they lost to USC and O.J. Simpson 14-3.
Wow. I mean,
now, do you know what the greatest bowl game Indiana ever played in was?
Wasn't that the Rose Bowl game?
No, it's the greatest game, but not their greatest win. The greatest win, I remember watching this game, was in 1979. They played BYU. BYU were big favorites in the game. It was the Holiday Bowl. Back then, in the late 70s, up through the mid to late 80s, it seemed like every Holiday Bowl was like the best bowl game played all year. Indiana beat BYU in 1979 in a Holiday Bowl, 38-37, in what was absolutely a great football game, and Indiana won it. That was Indiana's first bowl win. And then I could actually remember almost every Indiana bowl game except for the ones in the 2000s. I remember what happened under Coach Mallory, and they played Florida State in the All-American Bowl, got beat by a couple touchdowns. They lost the Peach Bowl by 5 to Tennessee. They beat South Carolina in the Liberty Bowl, And then they lost a great game in the Peach Bowl to Auburn. I think it was like 28-23 or 27-23. Then they won the Copper Bowl. The Copper Bowl. What a great bowl game that was over Baylor. And I don't think Indiana has not won a bowl game since 1991. I'm a Bengals fan. The Bengals have not won a playoff game since January of 1991. Maybe I should cheer for different teams.
Yeah, you got a tough time over there in football.
Oh, I'm a Reds fan, which means I did see 3 world championships, including the greatest team I've ever seen, the mid-'70s Reds. But since 1990, nothing. Indiana Hoosiers since 2002. Since then, nothing. But no national championship since 1987. So basically, the first half of my life, my teams all kicked ass. The last half of my life, my teams didn't. Oh, God, I hope it's not the last half of my life. Hopefully 50 years from now, I'll say the first quarter of my life and the last half of my life, my teams kicked ass. But there's 25% in there from the ages of 25 to 50 where my team sucked.
Yeah, I mean, you would hope that Indiana's starting to turn around, and with the, improved investments in the facilities, and clearly, I think the higher salary for Tom Allen, and I think a crucial thing for Indiana, and they're already paying a pretty hefty salary to Kalen DeBoer, but, if he's getting head coaching offers, they need to do everything they can in their power, including raising his salary even more.
Or making him the head coach, but I'm not going to go there right now because Indiana's won 8 games.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see that happening. I do think this. I think there's an argument to be made that possibly could be the right move long term, but I just can't see them making that move. But I do think, Kalen DeBoer is certainly going to be a name tossed around in a lot of the head coaching searches. And we'll see what caliber of teams those are. If we're looking at some, MAC teams, or we've talked about a couple different, not necessarily Power 5 teams, but still good programs like Memphis and Cincinnati and teams like that, that could possibly be in that conversation as well. But
yeah,
I
especially if Memphis beats Cincinnati again this week, though, they're playing on New Year's Day, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, you would think so. I mean, that's a team that's really – I did not see that coming from them. They've had a hell of a season.
Oh, they've had a hell of a 3 seasons. Their problem was – they had great seasons at the same time Central Florida did, and the last 2 years they've lost to Central Florida in their conference championship game.
Yeah. I mean, so and they obviously, Central Florida is a little bit down this year, and but Memphis has a bunch of quality wins too, or at least the potential. They obviously 1 win over Cincinnati. They can make that 2 wins. They did beat a pretty damn good SMU team as well. So they've got some quality wins. You would think for sure that's a team playing. If they beat Cincinnati, that's a team that's getting a New Year's Day bowl slot, you would think.
Yeah, and they can play with about anybody. Anybody that's not in the Final Four, they can play with in the country. They could score some points. Mike Norvell, their head coach, probably is going to be taken away from him after this year because he's been really good for 3 years. But if you look at them, they started off the year, they beat Ole Miss, which was an SEC school. They beat Navy. At the time they beat Navy, Navy was ranked. Navy's a good football team. They beat them by double digits. Their loss was to Temple at Temple. They're not the only team to go to Temple and get upset that was ranked this year. They beat a really good Tulane team by 30. 47-17, I think it was, and Tulane only lost to Auburn by like 5 points at Auburn a couple weeks before that. They beat a solid Tulsa team. They beat a really good SMU team in a shootout. That conference they're in is actually, I think, the most underrated football conference in the country. I think it's better than the ACC this year.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably agree with you. You look at the ACC, you've got Clemson, Virginia in that championship game. And IU has beaten Virginia each of the last 2 years. I'm not really sure that's a Virginia team that's much improved over those teams. I think if Indiana was in that conference, you'd be making in that side with Virginia, you'd be making an argument it could be Indiana in the ACC championship.
Oh, God, no. We don't want to watch Indiana play Clemson. Jeez.
Being murdered by Clemson in the championship game. You could
just imagine Indiana that has defensive issues playing against Trevor Lawrence and that running attack.
It would be it would be great to talk about Indiana in a conference championship game until the game happens, and we would just get absolutely stomped by it would be just like facing Ohio State like we did earlier in the year, and we all know how that went. That was a 51-10 blowout at home to Ohio State.
Actually, I think Clemson would beat us worse. I think Clemson's better than Ohio State. So? No, nobody else does. But all I know is last year, what I kept telling people, Clemson's going to beat Alabama. You know, I got shows to prove that I said that all year long. Everybody laughed at me. But Dabo Swinney, for my money, is the best coach in college football. And let's transition a little bit and talk about possible bowl scenarios for Indiana. I've looked through about 7 or 8 different sites. 3 of them have IU going to the Gator Bowl, 2 to the Red Box Bowl, 2 to the Pinstripe Bowl, 1 to the Music City Bowl. I think we're all hoping Music City because that's the shortest drive you could possibly get to watch Indiana. And I would love to see Indiana against Kentucky in the Music City Bowl.
Yeah, no, I think Indiana, Kentucky, and the Music City Bowl that just fits on so many levels. It's an old football rivalry that hasn't been played in a long time. I think you've got Kentucky, who's really a mid-level SEC team, and Indiana, who's kind of vaulted themselves into the mid-level of the Big Ten. That game would be a great game to watch. You would get probably a great crowd from both fan bases. It's an easy drive. I think that's best case scenario for Indiana. That's not a bad bowl game. I mean, it's not really as exciting as those top end bowl games, but as far as those, mid-level bowl games, it's not a horrible one to be in. So I think you'd get a good crowd, and it would definitely be, I think, a good game. I'm not really, I don't think it would be a blowout by either team, but and I think the Gator Bowl as well would be a good bowl game to go to. You'd probably find yourself matched up against an SEC team in the Gator Bowl as well. Likely, I think when you look at the SEC bowl picture, I think you have 2 bowl games, the Music City Bowl and the Gator Bowl, and I think one's going to take Kentucky, one's going to take Tennessee. There's been a lot of talk, I think, about the Red Box Bowl, and that's a bowl game that's likely to go to. I'm not convinced that. I think the Gator Bowl and the Music City Bowl are the 2 most likely scenarios for Indiana because they played in the Red Box Bowl a few years ago.
They're the 2 best scenarios, too.
Yeah, exactly. No, they are the 2 best scenarios. But when it comes to the Red Box Bowl, which I think is probably the 3rd most likely, Indiana played in that bowl game a few years ago. They didn't travel very well at all, didn't bring a good fan base. So I don't really know what the appeal of that bowl game, why they would want to take Indiana when they've proven, we can bring them out here. They're not going to bring a good crowd. They're not really going to be a huge attraction. So, I would think they would go in a different direction. I think the Music City Bowl, you're probably looking at a great crowd of Indiana fans traveling. I think that would be really, really attractive to them, especially if you play, Kentucky in the bowl game where you're looking at a rivalry matchup. A rivalry matchup that was played every year for a long time, but, unfortunately is no longer a thing. I think it'd be great to add them onto the schedule. Probably wouldn't be helpful for Indiana winning 6 games every year, but it'd be a fun game to watch. And certainly even the Gator Bowl, though, if you find yourself matched up in the Gator Bowl, Tennessee, I think that'd be another good matchup to watch. But I really think you're probably looking at one of those 3 bowl games, but I think the Music City Bowl and the Gator Bowl are the most likely outcomes.
And let's hope to God it's not the Pinstripe Bowl against Pittsburgh, which is what I've seen in a couple places now.
Yeah, that kind of surprised me. So I guess the issue there is you've got 2, I guess the bottom tier bowl games in the Big Ten. I would think those are going to go to Michigan State and Illinois. Those 2 teams are 6-6, both finished below Indiana in the Big Ten standings. Indiana won 2 games more. I would think you've got the Quick Lane Bowl and the Pinstripe Bowl. I don't know which order they're going to take them, but I would think Michigan State's going to one and Illinois is going to the other. I have a tough time seeing one of those teams jump Indiana for a bowl slot, winning 2 less games, and finishing below Indiana in the Big Ten standings. I just don't see that one happening.
Well, hopefully it doesn't. But you know what would be even better is if they just got rid of bowl games.
Yeah, I'm one of those rare Indiana fans where I probably legitimately like Indiana football more than I like Indiana basketball. I'm a bigger football fan than I am basketball fan. But, I've got to admit that the bowl game format is one of the least exciting formats, I think, of any major sport we have in this country. There's only so much excitement you can get to watch, an 8-4 team that really didn't beat anyone play a 6-6 team that, really didn't beat anyone either. It's just these bottom matchups just aren't very exciting. There's not a whole lot, to look forward to. And that's, I think, probably the appeal for a Music City matchup with Kentucky is you have the added rivalry element there. that would help to generate a lot more excitement than what it would be against, playing a random 7-5 team from a Power 5 conference. So I think that's probably what makes that the best case scenario, is you have that added element of the rivalry to kind of spice things up there.
Well, how about this, though? When I was younger, back in the old days, back when Jesse James was robbing trains, the bowl games were a huge deal. But the only way the bowl games can be a huge deal is if you have conference tie-ins, like the old Rose Bowl, the Cotton Bowl, the Orange Bowl, and you didn't have a college football playoff system. But with a college football playoff system, everything else is an exhibition game. We've seen guys like Christian McCaffrey choose not to play in these bowl games. And when you look at this, December the 20th, bowl season kicks off with the Makers Wanted Bahamas Bowl between Buffalo and Charlotte.
Yeah, that's not the most exciting game you're going to get there.
And it's called the Bahamas Bowl. And last year, it would be cool to go to the Bahamas if you're on that team, but I think there was like 13 people in the crowd. The next bowl game is the Tropical Smoothie Cafe Frisco Bowl, which right now is projected to be Temple and San Diego State. We have the New Mexico Bowl, which is UAB and Nevada. There's no games here I want to watch. The Cure Bowl. What in the hell is the Cure Bowl? And it's going to be played by Georgia State and Florida International. We have the Cherry Bundy Boca Raton Bowl between Ohio and Florida Atlantic. We got the Camilla Bowl between Georgia Southern and Western Michigan. These are just projections. You got the Las Vegas Bowl, Boise State, Washington State's an all right matchup. The R+L Carriers New Orleans Bowl, which is where Louisiana Lafayette plays every year. The Gasparilla Bowl, which right now could be Toledo and Southern Miss. That's a great matchup. The SoFi Hawaii Bowl. The Walk-Ons on the Independence Bowl. I mean, I can't find a game here that I would want to watch the way they got it matched up right now for a long time.
Yeah, no, I definitely think there's an element of, there's just so many bowl games now, and so many of them are matchups that just, your common fan's not going to find exciting. Even sometimes a lot of those fans of those schools aren't going to find them very exciting. And, obviously there's all that talk about the college football playoff. I don't think it's going away anytime soon. I think it's,
it should be expanded. There should be 16 teams in it.
I completely agree. I think expanding the college football playoffs is something that needs to happen. Even these last couple of years, I think there's been some teams that have been taken in the college football playoff that probably don't deserve to be, didn't play as harder schedules, but won a lot of games and got embarrassed when they got to the playoffs. And I think, the easier solution then, instead of leaving out good teams that probably should be in there, just expand it, put more teams in there. And if you get some blowouts, fine. You're already getting some blowouts with the way you're doing it right now. So I think that's the logical thing to do there. And, I guess we'll see. Hopefully Indiana gets an exciting matchup. Like I said, I think the Kentucky bowl game, that you get the rivalry factor. Even if it's not a bowl game, Indiana, Kentucky, that's an exciting matchup that I think people would be interested in. You get a great crowd. But, yeah, I think it's very fair to say the way the bowl game system is set up right now, you're getting, nearly half of those bowl games are just games that aren't going to be exciting. No one's really going to tune in. You're not going to draw great crowds. It's just, it's an unfortunate fact of how the bowl system works. I think, like I said, out of all of the major sports we have in this country, I think the college football bowl system is by far the least exciting format that is in existence right now.
Man, I'm going through this looking at the history of Indiana football, trying to count up how many winning seasons they've had. And,
oh, gosh.
Dude, I'm back to 1928, and we're at 10. Dude, this is really, really bad. Jumbo Steam did a really good job. He went 5-2 one year. Yeah, this is really sad. I have counted, and I may be off because I'm kind of talking on air and everything, but I count 19 winning seasons in, 120 years. So every 6 years, Indiana wins more than they lose. Lifetime record, 467 wins, 660 losses, 38 ties.
Yeah, that's tough. I don't really even know what else to say about that.
Because I was thinking,
Wow.
I could look back at this, and like if you go before the 2000s, when you had to usually win more than 6 games to make a bowl game, I'm thinking, well, how many times would IU have made a bowl game if it would have been just 6 wins to get you in? And the only time I can find is 1980. 1980, they went 6-5 and didn't go to a bowl game.
Wow. Wow. Yeah,
And
well,
I didn't realize this, but Bill Mallory was 0-11 his first year at Indiana.
Wow, was he really? I did not know that either.
Yeah, he was
I had no
0-11.
idea about that.
In 1985, 4-7. 1986, 6-6, played the All-American Bowl. 1987, 8-4, lost in the Peach Bowl. That was the team that if they'd have beat Michigan State, they'd have been going to the Rose Bowl, possibly. But they didn't. So Lee Corso, you would think since he's on TV so much, would have a better record. But he's 2-9, 1-10, 2-9, 5-6, 5-5, 4-7, 8-4, 6-5, 3-8, 5-6, and he got the hell out of here.
Yeah, I do. I remembered some talk about the Lee Corso era. It was not a great era for Indiana.
Well, it was because they went to a bowl game and won that bowl game. That right there makes him a top 3 coach in Indiana history. It's like him and John Pont and Bill Mallory.
Unfortunately, I would love to try to argue against that, but honestly, I guess when you look at 19 winning seasons since 19 whatever year you got to 20, was it 1920 that you got to?
1899. They had 18 winning seasons since then. Now.
Yes.
They had Phil Dickens, who in 1958 had a winning record, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 straight losing records where he didn't win more than 3 games in a season. John Pont goes 2-8 his first year, 1-8 his second year, 9-2. They lose the Rose Bowl, 6-4. Then he's 4-6, 1-9, 3-8, 5-6. There's just the closest thing you have here. Bill Mallory is the greatest Indiana football coach. And the reason I say that is if you look at his record, after you get past the 0-11 and the 4-7, he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 out of his 11 seasons after those first 2 years. So 7 out of 13 seasons he had a winning record. Or 7 out of 12.
Yeah.
That makes him a legendary coach.
That's unheard of.
Yeah, and he actually had 3 straight winning seasons, 2 straight winning seasons, and then he had 2 straight winning seasons again.
Yeah, that's it's depressing. It's depressing that and Bill Mallory was he was a very good coach. I don't want to take anything away from him, but he has you're talking about him as the best Indiana football coach at all time, and he has a losing record. So
Bill Mallory, yeah, but that's also because he took over that Sam Weiss mess. And
I don't think it's entirely his fault. But
if you take away the 0-11 at the start, he's got a winning record. But Sam Weiss came in here in 1983, and Sam is a great guy. I've had him on like 3 or 4 different shows. Great dude. But he took over the Indiana program in 1983, changed the uniforms, changed everything. And, talked about going to the Rose Bowl, and instead they went 3-8. And after 1 year, he became the head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, he then, of course, took the Bengals to the Super Bowl a few years later. But then Mallory came in. But this is the thing. I think Terry Hepner was a guy that could have turned this program around. I don't know if you remember Hep or not. But
I do. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Terry was a great coach.
I still remember just going to that bucket game, the year he passed away where Bill Lynch took over. And I think that was the year where Indiana had 6 wins and probably was not going to get a bowl game with that 6 wins. And they kind of had to beat Purdue at the end of the year to get to 7 wins and the kick to win that game. I still remember that game. That was one of the big memories I have of Indiana football growing up, because it was probably the best memory of Indiana football I have growing up, because that was kind of a special season. But, I think one of the weird things we have going on is, Tom Allen is sitting in Indiana with a record of 18 or 19. It'll be interesting to see, if he can build this program, could he maybe possibly rack up a winning record in his time here? You're looking at 500 if he's building the team the right way. I don't know. We're talking about all these losing coaches, and I'm looking at Tom Allen's record of 18-19, and it doesn't look too bad in comparison
No, he's 18
to really
and
what we've had
18,
before.
isn't he? I think he's 18 and 18.
Well,
He's 500.
I think if you count technically, so he's 18 and 18 and essentially full seasons as a head coach. If you count the bowl game he coached
the bowl
after
game
Kevin
he lost.
Wilson was
Foster
yeah,
Farms Bowl.
yeah, he's which is essentially the I believe that's actually what the Red Box Bowl is now. So that's the same bowl game that we lost to a pretty good Utah team. I think they were like top 20 in that year. But,
Utah's done much better than us since then too.
Well, they've got a legitimate chance of the college football playoffs. So
well, if they beat Oregon, they
year.
should be in the college football playoffs. And I'll give you this: you go back and you listen to the college football preview show I did with Randy Cross, who works for CBS Sports. He's played for the Niners. My prediction at the start of this season was Utah to make it to the college football playoffs.
Wow, you called that? Wow.
Yes. I'm going to rebroadcast that show if they make it too, and I'll tag you in it on Twitter or something.
Yeah, I mean, if you called that, that would be very, very impressive. I mean, I think you have a very real argument. Though. If they beat Oregon, I think you'd have a tough time trying to make an argument to leave them out.
Well,
I guess
the thing about it is their one loss was to USC, but USC now is in the AP top 25. They've turned out to not be too bad of a team.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's not a bad loss by any stretch of the imagination to me. I think USC is certainly that's a team that won 8 games. So it's not exactly a horrible loss. It was on the road at USC. And, Oregon's a good football team. So if they beat Oregon and, you're sitting at 12-1, I'm assuming you're probably going to have Georgia lose to LSU. And,
well, I think
if Georgia wins
because I
game,
think the problem is if Georgia beats LSU, they're going to take both of those teams.
Oh, I don't think there's any question about it. So I think Georgia beating LSU would throw some things into chaos, and you'd have to take both games. I don't see how you would leave one out. But if Georgia loses that game, they're out, and I think it's really down to Utah and Oklahoma. And if Utah wins, I'd probably be taking Utah.
Yeah, Utah's the better all-around team, and they've got a very good quarterback. They've got a great running game, and I think they've got one of the best defenses in college football. And they're playing really well right now, too, on defense. I mean, if you look at it, UCLA is not a great team, but they could score points on people. Utah beat them, I think, 49-3. Arizona's got the quarterback who's really athletic, really good. They beat them 35-7. They beat Colorado 45-14. So they've given up a total of 8 points on average per game over the last 3 games against teams that have been able to score points this year.
Yeah. And, I think Oklahoma's probably the opposite of that. I'm not sure how good they are defensively right now. I'm not sure.
They looked better at the start of the year, but now they just look like typical Oklahoma. But then again, Oklahoma's going to put more butts in the seats. They're going to have more people turning TVs on. And like I said, Utah beat a really good Cal team 35-0. They beat a really good Arizona State team 21-3. They beat a solid Washington State team 38-13. I mean, the only close game they've had outside of the USC game was beating Washington in Washington 33-28. Washington's a pretty good football team, though.
Yeah. No, Washington's a solid team, and that's a team I've seen Indiana matched up in some bowl predictions. I think they had them in one of the Red Box Bowl things that I saw. So that could be a possible opponent for IU. Yeah, and they're a solid team. And, I think, to me, if everything goes as expected and you've got Georgia losing to LSU, I think they're out. And if Utah is able to take care of business against Oregon, I don't think there's a great argument to leave them out. Even if Oklahoma is able to win their game, to me, Utah is the obvious choice there to fill in for Oklahoma.
What if Baylor beats Oklahoma?
Georgia. Yes.
I mean, this is the problem you've got with only 4 teams. You're always going to leave somebody out that deserves a shot.
Oh, yeah, I don't think there's any – and that's why I agree with you. I completely agree. They've got to expand the college football playoff. To me, there's no reason – I don't know why they're resisting the change. I don't know the ins and outs of what those discussions are.
I can answer because I wrote an article on this and did some research. The answer is this. Right now, if it's only Power 5 schools in the playoffs, all the money goes to Power 5 schools. The reason a team like Central Florida, even 2 years ago when they probably deserved a chance, don't get in, is because if they get in Instead, that money, their cut goes to them and their conference, and it takes money away from the Power Five schools.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
So
I
if
did not
just
know
put
that.
it like this, if you've got $1 million, and it's a hell of a lot more than that, but if you've got $1 million and a quarter of that money goes to each school that makes it to the playoffs, you got a Big Ten, an SEC, a Big 12, and a Pac 12, for example. Each one of those get a quarter of that pie. The problem is when you remove the Pac 12 school and put in Central Florida, all of a sudden a quarter of that goes to the AC or the AAC instead of to a Power Five. And the only people that are allowed to vote on this are Power Five schools. So it would take an act of God, or as Central Florida, 3 straight years of being undefeated, to even be in the conversation for this. And this is why it's a joke. And they'll say, the NCAA will tell you, we don't want to do it because kids have final exams and school's important. But the problem is, NAI or Division One AA, NAIA all have 32 teams in their football playoffs. Those kids actually really go to school. You know, they don't have tutors assigned to them to do stuff for them. And those kids find time to do this. And if you did not play a conference championship game, because you don't need it if you're going to take 16 or 32 teams, say if you just take 16, and right now the playoffs started this weekend, that's going to be December the 7th. The quarterfinals is December the 14th. The semifinals is the 21st of December. You could play the national championship game on December 28th. You're done before you even get to January. But instead,
Yeah.
they play a 4-team college football playoff where you're actually done a week and a half to 2 weeks later. So it's all bullshit. It's all smoke and mirrors by the NCAA. They just want to make sure that all the money is confined to who they want it confined to.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's very – I did not know that. That's actually very interesting. I don't think there's any doubt. They want the money going to these Power Five conferences that have these flagship programs. And when people hear about, Michigan, Ohio State, those teams, that draws attention, that draws viewers. And that's what ultimately, unfortunately, this is all about. It's all about ratings. It's all about that. And, these non-Power Five teams just aren't going to have the same TV pull. They're not going to draw those ratings. But, yeah, no, I did not know that. That's actually fascinating.
Yeah,
kind of depressing, but
if you look at it, Central Florida, their first year in the bowl games, who was it they beat? Auburn? And Auburn was ranked in the top 6. They went and they beat Auburn. We don't know what they would have done. Sure, maybe they lose to Alabama or Clemson, but they deserve the opportunity, and the opportunity is taken away. So basically what you have is Division I college football, which is Power 5 schools, 1AA, which is the other schools, and then you got Division II, or the real 1AA, that play in playoffs. Because the smallest grouping of playoffs, I think, is 16 teams for any level of football. And like I said, when you get to NAIA with 32 schools, those are schools that probably aren't flying to their playoff games. They're taking a bus, and they're still getting their schoolwork done. So why not let these kids play for something? And if you've got 16 teams in this, and Stanford's ranked 15th, and Christian McCaffrey's the running back, he'll play for a national championship because it's worth the risk to him then. He's not going to play in the Gasparilla Bowl against North Carolina.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm completely on board. I mean, I think expanding the college football playoff picture, for college football championship playoff picture, I think it's obvious. I think it's the logical thing to do. We'll see if it. I know the NCAA has been resisting it, which I think is absolutely idiotic. But yeah, those reasons are, I think
they
that sheds a lot of
resisted
light on
any
it probably,
kind of playoff for 100 years. Then you had the BCS championship game, and now you got a Final Four. So maybe eventually it'll be a Final 8, but even with the Final 8, they're going to be able to control that. It's when you get more than 8 that they can't control it, because almost every year, somewhere between 9 and 16 sits one of these little schools that aren't supposed to be there. And it's kind of like we live in a culture where everybody wants a trophy, so everybody will allow this to go on, because at Indiana, if there was just a college football playoff system, you might have to schedule somebody in those first 3 games. I mean, because going 8-4 doesn't mean a damn thing then.
Yeah.
And that's the way it should be. Because I want to live in a country where excellence is rewarded, not mediocrity. And right now, we live in a world that if you're mediocre, if you're average, well, that's good enough, Johnny. I'll pat you on the ass and give you a lollipop and everything will be fine. But it shouldn't be. Because in all reality, we live in a world where only the strong survive. And strong people are not average people. And that's what pisses me off about the Indiana program. And everybody's happy with, well, we went 8-4. We didn't beat anybody any good, but we won 8 games. And sure, half of those games we beat teams that were terrible, and we were lucky we won because the games went down to the final few minutes. I expect more than that. I shouldn't, because I've been an Indiana football fan my whole life, but that's what I expect. I expect for at least the effort to be a legitimate program. And when you start off the season with the 3 teams they started it off with, you're not prepared to play Ohio State. You get beat 51-10. Ohio State started the season off with Florida Atlantic and Cincinnati. Florida Atlantic and Cincinnati are both winning teams. UC was ranked until this week. I think they might have dropped out after losing to Memphis. They're going to play for their conference championship. Florida Atlantic is going to play for their conference championship. Indiana played freaking Eastern Illinois, who's not playing for anything that I know of in 1AA, and Ball State.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think there's any doubt about it. Indiana's non-conference schedule was, simply awful, and
it's better than the basketball team's schedule, though.
Yeah, well, yeah, both teams got it going on right now with the light non-conference schedule, though. And IU's defense, I think, or in the basketball team's defense, I think it's about to pick up here, and we'll see how it works out because they haven't played anyone.
It's about to pick up, but this is the problem because I'm going to come back to the same thing if Florida State beats their heads in. It's going to be they weren't ready. Florida State's playing teams that are good, like Florida and UConn. They're playing these guys, while Indiana's playing a bunch of slapdick competition that can't get out of their own way. I mean, the best team they played was Louisiana Tech. And we could all sit here and BS each other about how Louisiana Tech probably be in the tournament. They won't. They'll be in the NIT. They're going to be 20-11 because the Sun Belt Conference is pretty good, and there's a couple teams better than them. And Indiana struggled with them for a large part of that game. And when you look at it, you don't get better playing poor competition all the time. And that's what worries me. IU, they could have played Ball State and followed it up with Miami of Ohio. But why Eastern Illinois? They're a 1AA program.
Yeah, I don't have the explanation there. I don't even know why you'd schedule that team. It wasn't a challenge. It was almost like a bye week with a game or a glorified scrimmage. Essentially, Indiana dominated that game start to finish. I don't know what the appeal of that is. Like you said, you can schedule another lower end MAC team that, you shouldn't have any trouble beating them, but they'll at least give you a better challenge. They'll be just better athletes on the field for a team like that. And logically, you would think you should improve more from that, but they didn't do that. They went down this route of, essentially playing a cupcake opponent. But I will say this for Indiana. They do, at least for the football team, I haven't looked at the future basketball team schedule, but the football team, they're going to have some pretty notable non-conference opponents coming up here in a few years. I know they have a deal to play Louisville in the non-conference. I know they have another deal to play Cincinnati in the non-conference, and I don't think next year, but I think the year after that, I forget who they add first. I believe it's Louisville that they'll add to their schedule, and then they'll play them for a few years, and then they'll switch to Cincinnati. So they're going to pick it up with at least one notable game in their non-conference in the future.
Yeah, I can live with that. I can live with one notable game. Just not Eastern Illinois, UConn. 2020, Western Kentucky, Ball State, UConn. That still sucks.
Yeah.
2021, Idaho, Cincinnati, Western Kentucky. 2022, Idaho, Western Kentucky, Cincinnati. 2023, Indiana State, Louisville, Akron. 2024, Florida International, Louisville, Charlotte. 2025, Louisville and Indiana State. 2027, they've got Indiana State scheduled. So I still don't see a huge improvement there, but Cincinnati and Louisville are much better than anything they normally play in the non-conference.
Yeah, hands down, I don't think it's really even close. I'm trying to think the last team we played in the non-con, I guess Virginia is probably, that's the last couple of years we've played them, and somehow we're able to win both those games. And Indiana just has historically not really added a bunch of, notable opponents in the non-conference, usually probably because that's been a team that if you schedule a notable game, then you're probably losing that game. And you're trying to find 6 wins, and you need all of those non-conference wins. And it just, and that goes to speak to how poor the program has been. But if this program's going to be built in a way that's going to be satisfactory for everyone, and I think beating teams in the non-conference, not just cupcakes, but actual, Power 5 teams, or not even Power 5 teams, or, a team like Cincinnati, you should not be afraid of playing competition like that, because if you are, then clearly the program's not being built in any respectable way.
Hey, but I can tell you
even
this.
If you lose,
it'll tell you that the Power 5 conferences aren't that great. Then when we look at that Cincinnati game and you think that there's a decent shot, that's a loss.
Yeah. Well, certainly I think Cincinnati is just an underrated football team. I don't think
they're very well coached with Luke Fickell.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a team that could be in a Power 5 conference and more than just hold their own there. They'd be, I think, at the top end of a lot of Power 5 conferences. But at the end of the day, even if Indiana plays those teams, and even if they lose the game to a team like Cincinnati, I think they can learn more from a loss to a team like Cincinnati than they would learn from a win over Eastern Illinois. And, hopefully Indiana gets to a point where you're not saying, okay, we need to schedule 3 winnable games in the non-conference that are, cupcake wins so we can get to 6 wins. Hopefully you can get to a point where 4 or 5 wins in conference play is expected, and you can start ripping off 4 or 5 wins in conference play year after year. So you're not counting on 3 non-conference wins just to have a chance to go into the postseason. But, the unfortunate truth is that's been Indiana football for the better part of my lifetime. Is they've needed 4 wins, and back when they played 4 non-conference games, they needed 4 non-conference wins, and hopefully they can win 2 Big Ten games. That's been Indiana football. And now that they're down to 3 non-conference games, we need 3 non-conference wins, and hopefully we can win 3 football games in the Big Ten. But if this program is going to be changed under Tom Allen, that attitude needs to change. I think it's one of the biggest things that they've got to get rid of that, and they've got to be one. They should be expecting to win at least 4 games in the Big Ten if this program is going to be built to where Tom Allen thinks it needs to be.
I agree completely. Let's go ahead and let's wrap this up. I never thought this show would last more than 45 minutes, Cole.
Yeah, we had a lot to talk. I think we kind of.
Hey, how about this real quick? I'll give it an example. Bill Mallory, 1988. This is a couple years after Indiana had gotten pretty good. Their non-conference schedule was Rice, which at the time was a Southwestern Conference school. They weren't terrible. Kentucky and Missouri. I mean, that's actually a decent non-conference schedule.
That's a very legitimate non-conference. Yeah. That would be one of the best. If IU played those teams today, that would be that'd probably be the best non-conference schedule they've had in a long, long, long time.
Yeah, I don't know. Does Rice still have a football team though?
I don't know, but you would even not play Rice, and it would still be. You could play some high school football team just as long as you're playing Kentucky and Missouri. It'd still probably be better.
Yeah, the Kentucky and Missouri, they'd be playing 2 SEC schools now. You go to 1989, you got Kentucky, Missouri, Toledo.
Yeah, well, I think Kentucky would be a game I would love to see added back on that schedule. I still think that Kentucky game would draw a lot of attention. It'd be a fun game. And I think, you've got 2. I mean, Kentucky has not been a world beater in the SEC by any stretch, and neither is Indiana. You kind of have 2 teams that are on a similar level. I think Kentucky is a lot better now than what they used to be, and hopefully Indiana's building towards that spot as well. I think it's a logical game that would make a lot of sense. Don't know if it will ever happen, but it's a rivalry game. I don't know why Indiana wouldn't pursue that, because I think it would be a fun game.
All right. Well, maybe neither one are pursuing it right now. You never know. We're going to go ahead. We are going to wrap this show up because we're only 4.5 hours away from finding out if Indiana is any good at basketball this year or not, Cole.
Yeah. Big game tonight. It's Indiana's first actual opponent, so to speak. And, I think Florida State's very, very good. So they're going to have their hands full because, Florida State's the best team Indiana's played by a country mile.
Yeah, and you can hear me and Ken Sterling talk about it tomorrow at 3 o'clock on the Indiana Basketball Weekly Show. And you can hear Cole Hanna on Rivals with Taylor Lehman. Are you guys doing a show tomorrow?
We're probably going to do it sometime tomorrow morning. It'll be up on Rivals if anyone wants to go give it a listen. And I know you and Ken have a great show that I think is getting a lot of attention as well. So, but yeah, we'll probably aim for that and sometime tomorrow morning and be up early sometime tomorrow.
All right, guys, and you can follow Cole Hanna at Cole Hanna5, correct?
Correct. Yep.
All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I want to remind everybody you can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify. Wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So, for Cole Hanna, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.